everyone, and welcome to our Medical Minute podcast. This is episode 24. I'm Sherry Hughes, and I'm in the driver's seat today. Steve Abbott is taking the day off, and Jill is here with us, and we do have a guest, Josh Robinson. Hello.
Hey, happy to be here.
Glad you could be here with us as well. And again, Steve taking a little time off. You think he's like out
I'm sure that he's
enjoying?
Somewhere drinking plenty of water. Plenty of water.
Yeah.
But he is definitely missed.
Yeah, that's an inside joke. We keep telling him, which Steve is also a cancer survivor. We always tell him to drink
He keeps
up.
trying to convince me that there is water in wine.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he might be somewhere having a little vino. Yeah.
I do not doubt it in the least.
Yeah. Well, today we are here to talk about a cancer of the blood. It is called Hodgkin's disease, aka Hodgkin's lymphoma. And you may be aware that there are two types of Hodgkin's, so to speak. One is Hodgkin's and the other is non-Hodgkin's.
So, two types of lymphoma. We have either Hodgkin's lymphoma or non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. When you get into non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, you have a lot more subcategories. What makes Hodgkin's lymphoma so unique is that there's a special cell that is associated specifically with the Hodgkin's lymphoma. It's called a Reed-Sternberg cell. Would you like to guess the name of the person that identified the cell for the first time?
Hodgkin's, right?
No, it was Reed-Sternberg.
Reed-Sternberg.
And the other thing that's a little bit different about Hodgkin's disease or Hodgkin's lymphoma versus non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma can be found anywhere in the body. Versus Hodgkin's, when Hodgkin's lymphoma is diagnosed, it's usually above the belt. So usually in the chest area, it's either neck, chest, or underneath the arms. It doesn't mean that it can only be found there, but in most cases, that's one of the characteristics that makes it a little bit more different than non-Hodgkin's.
And we invited Josh in today because, Josh, you were diagnosed with Hodgkin's. Can you tell us when that was, and if you even knew at the time, had you even heard of Hodgkin's disease?
Yeah, I had no idea what it was. I got the diagnosis August 2020, and
So in the middle of COVID.
Yes, so it happened in the middle of COVID. Had no idea what Hodgkin's was. I had no idea that it was going to be cancer. Of course, you Google your symptoms, and I saw it as maybe the fifth option on there. I was like, well, that's how the internet is. When you Google your symptoms, of course, cancer is going to show up at some point. Thought it was maybe a cyst, and had a surgery and found out that it was indeed Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Wow. And so you said you actually had a cyst. We know that Hodgkin's affects the lymphatic system, but Jill, you were talking to me earlier about, I said, lymphatic system, that's everywhere in the body, right?
So the lymphatic system runs the body just like all of the veins and the arteries do. It's another highway system. And as you're going through that highway system, you have little rest areas. And, that would be your lymph nodes. And with any type of lymphoma, the problem happens when things get hung up and those cancer cells start growing in those lymph nodes.
And you know what? You talked about, Josh mentioned a cyst. Cancer cells start growing in the lymph node. Is that when you start to feel like one of the nodes being a little bit more inflamed, or?
It's funny. Whenever we see patients, I don't ever use words like cyst or mass or anything. I just ask, do you feel any lumps or bumps?
Right.
So I'm guessing you had a lump or a bump.
That's exactly what it was. So maybe 6 months before I got the diagnosis, I went and saw my doctor, was like, I feel like you got to check me. Is my testosterone low? Is something going on? And did blood work, did everything.
So were you noticing
and it was
more
all
fatigue?
Good. I was noticing a little bit of fatigue, and also around that same time, I had gotten exercise bands to work out at home because, pandemic, we can't go to the gym anymore. And I was doing bicep curls, and I kept on feeling like a little bit of clicking going on in there. And I just put it off for, again, around 6 months, and finally saw the doctor again. This time I told him about what I thought was a cyst going on. He was like, let's go ahead and get that removed. How does surgery next week sound? And at that point, I should have realized, there's probably something going on. But I thought, it's COVID. Maybe they've got a lot of openings right now.
And you're a young guy. I mean, oftentimes people hear cancer. We know it can affect no matter what age you are, no matter what your ethnicity is, you can be diagnosed with cancer. But oftentimes we think it's for older folks. And here you see Josh, a young guy, you know, just getting started in his life, and he's saying that, you know, he's feeling some irregularities that end up becoming a diagnosis of cancer.
And that actually, with Hodgkin's lymphoma, the age that it standardly hits is between 20 and 40. So it does tend to hit some of the younger population more frequently.
Right, especially the one that I got diagnosed with. It was lymphocyte rich. Originally was categorized, I think, as mixed cell. Second opinion proved to be lymphocyte rich, and that was specifically impacted men around my age.
And you know what? We're talking that you're in that 20 to 35 age group.
Yes.
That is super young. What did you feel like, or how did you feel when you found out? Was it during the surgery or after the surgery that they let you know that there was cancer?
A couple days after the surgery, and I got a call just thinking, you know, they're just letting me know everything was good. I can take out the glue. But yeah, they called, said that I had cancer, and my world kind of flipped on top of itself. Never would have thought that would have been the case. I just felt kind of alone because, you know, you would hear things growing up like, oh, so-and-so had cancer, but I never thought it would happen to me, let alone at that age.
Yeah, exactly. And Jill, you were talking about the fact that this particular cancer is one that is really very treatable. So
Right. Absolutely. I mean, the 5-year survival rate is 95%.
Right.
Most people do the first line of treatment, and it's done, and they're cured. It doesn't change the fact that when you're in your 20s and 30s, that you're still facing a cancer diagnosis and the treatment that goes along with it. Because I mean, Josh, you can speak to the fact that, you know, it wasn't a walk in the park.
No, yeah, it was definitely not a walk in the park. I thought it would be after the first round of chemo. So I did, not to jump too far ahead, I did 3 rounds of chemo, so 6 doses. And I remember after the first one thinking, you know what, that wasn't too bad. I actually went out and played street hockey, just kind of skating around, not with anyone else around because, one, no immune system and COVID going around. But went around, skated around. After the second dose, though, that's when I realized I was in for it. And it was a tough ride after that, especially the last 2 doses.
Yeah, and we talk about, Josh mentioned his immune system. That is something that Hodgkin's affects very dramatically, right? Because your immune system is taking a huge hit.
Well, obviously you've got a little bit of disconnect because the lymph nodes and the lymphocytes are being affected. But to speak a little bit to what Josh was saying, like the treatment that you get knocks your cells down even more. So definitely, and in the midst of a pandemic, I can't imagine all of the extra precautions that were being taken.
I was a bubble boy for the entire, well, my wife is, as well. We did not leave the house unless it was to go on maybe a hike or something like that. And even when we went out and did that, it was heavy precautions, double masking, hand sanitizer always. And other than that, seeing people through the front window.
Yeah, but you know, as we say, life goes on and you handle it because at the time you actually were planning, right, a wedding?
So actually the story behind that is we moved in together that summer to try and, you know, tiptoe our way. Like, hey, we think that this is the way it's going. We both wanted to get married, but we wanted to live together first. So I think we had lived together for maybe a month and a half, maybe 2 months. And I get my diagnosis, and we start going to all the meetings. And every single time they looked at Allison, they're like, oh, well, who's this person in here with you? It's like, oh, well, that's my girlfriend. And we sat down and had a conversation like, hey, you know, we want to get married. We want to do this. And okay, if we want to do it eventually, let's go ahead and do it now and go into this, you know, as one unit.
So you didn't let the diagnosis of cancer, you know, I guess stop you from living And
Right.
that's something that we try to, tell people all the time, that it's a circumstance, it's something that's going on and it's serious, because it happened to me as well. But you don't want to stop living. You really want to live even more.
Right. So we went to the courthouse on a Friday, basically eloped, and started chemo on Monday. So great way to spend a honeymoon. But now we're, I think almost a year and a half, almost 2 years out from it, and celebrating with a wedding this summer.
I love it.
Very
I love it. And
nice.
we have maybe a couple of minutes left. I want to talk about you mentioned chemotherapy. Was there radiation as well associated with your?
Not directly, no. Of course, there was some radiation that I got from the PET scan. But I just did 3 rounds of I'm blanking on it now. I used to know the term so
ABVD?
well. ABVD.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, ABVD with the red devil in there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Red Devil.
And so
Yeah.
for our viewers, we like to use all kinds of acronyms, but we like to keep it simple.
Yeah.
So ABVD, it's 4 letters, and it's another cocktail, no umbrella included, but it's 4 drugs that are given as part of that treatment plan.
Right. So I'm going to try and remember it. Azithromycin, vinblastine.
Those are tough too.
I forget the rest of
Yeah.
them.
So, overall, your diagnosis, we talked about, the fact that a lot of people want to get out there and be advocates like myself, but sometimes, you know what, you don't really want to talk about it that much, but it's important to help people.
Yeah, if it weren't for the whole trying to maybe help someone around my age that's going through this, then I would not be here. Again, I feel like it's kind of split after people finish up their treatments. It's, do you want to get involved? Do you want to be an advocate like you were doing? And for me, I'd rather just live a life
And leave it in the past.
And leave it in the past. Yeah, not pretending that it didn't happen, although there are some nice days where I kind of forget about it. But yeah, I just kind of want to leave it in the past and move on from it all.
Well, you know what? We're so glad that you're here. We're so glad that you're doing well. There's so much more to cover, so we're going to do a part 2. And when we come back next week, we're going to be talking about, how do you know if you might have Hodgkins, or what are those symptoms and what should you be looking out for? And, also we'll dive a little bit more into Josh's life and where he is right now and how you can survive this and other cancers as well. So thank you for joining us this week. We want you to like this podcast and share it as well, so we can get more people in the conversation, and hopefully you're getting some good education from this. Josh, thank you for being here with us, and don't go away, because we're going to have that part 2. And Jill, you're going to be talking more about those symptoms, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, and have a good one.